despite his winning, the perception is that he has lost. And perception, as you know, Sarah, is everything in politics.
Hi, I'm Sarah Forster, news editor here at The National, and thank you for joining me for this week's A Closer Look. Now, all eyes have been on India as they count the votes in their 2024 election. Now, it looks like Narendra Modi is set to take on a third term in power, but is it going to be a clean sweep? To talk more about this, we've brought in two special guests today. We have from our opinion desk, CB Kadalayil, and from our foreign desk, Indranil Ghosh. Thank you, gents, for joining me.
Thank you.
So first of all, CB, we'll come straight to you. I mean, was it a clean sweep?
No, it wasn't. So the way it works is the lower house of India's parliament has 543 seats. So for any party or alliance of parties to form a government, they need to cross the halfway threshold. So that's 272 seats. Now, so to answer your question, it was and it wasn't a clean sweep. So Prime Minister Narendra Modi's party, the Bharatiya Janata Party, the BJP, which has been in power for 10 years and has won 2 consecutive elections, this was the third, they got 240 seats. So they are still 32 seats away from forming a government on their own, which is what they did in the 2 previous elections. But they're part of an alliance, the NDA, and the NDA has 292 seats. So you would assume that it's a shoo-in, they're going to form a government, and Modi is going to be a prime minister for a 3rd consecutive term. Now, that's what's going to happen, almost certainly. But what we're hearing on the ground is the opposition India alliance, they've got about 230 odd seats. So they're trying to lure some of the smaller parties from the NDA to jump ship, to join them, and then probably form a very rickety coalition. So I assume there's a lot of parleying going on over the next few days. And we'll see what happens. But I think as of now, it just seems like Modi is going to be prime minister for one more term.
Okay. Yeah. And what significance does this have that he is now entering his 2nd decade in power?
So as I said, the last 2 terms, he enjoyed brute majorities in parliament, and he could do, and his government could do whatever they wanted, whatever they pleased. And to some extent, that was good for the country because they could push through some very serious reforms. But some of the reforms that they pushed through, they did it in a shoddy way. They're trying to run through without much discussion with the opposition or with pressure groups on the ground. And in the process, what they did was they had to walk back some of these reforms when there were protests happening on the streets. So there was opposition from the ground rather than from the opposition parties. The other thing they did was, in order to try and maximize their power and even possibly extend to get the numbers even beyond what they already had in parliament, they tried to break opposition parties, split them. They sent investigative agencies after some of the leaders of these opposition parties, supposedly to in the name of anti-corruption, but what they were trying to do was lure them into their party and to broaden the tent. So they were doing a lot of that, a lot of the bullying was happening, and it was coming to a point where people were getting a bit fed up of just a very strong party with a strong man at the helm of it. And so I think what this election has done is, I think it's returned some normality to Indian politics, where there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of, it is messy. Democracy is a mess. It's a messy project, but I think there will be an equalizing effect. And I think even if Prime Minister Modi is in power for however long, maybe the next 5 years, I think he'll have to work with opposition parties, and that's always good for Indian democracy.
It is, right. So now I'm going to move on to Indranil. Indranil, what's been the external reaction to this? Because obviously India is quite a big player on the world stage. How has the world reacted to what's going on in the Indian elections?
It's a very good question, Sarah. See, if you see Modi's reign in Indian politics, you'll see that in the first 5 years of his rule, he went about repairing his image in the world stage after the Gujarat riots. And he was a kind of a political pariah. He was, banned from the US, and he went about, repairing his relations with the world leaders. So in the next 5, he went about, establishing himself as a, political heavyweight, where he almost kind of, convinced the people to think of India as Modi and Modi as India. Now what has happened is that despite his winning, the perception is that he has lost. And perception, as you know, Sarah, is everything in politics. So now he has to focus more on his home rather than on overseas, relations, because he must find out what went wrong. You have to understand that he set the bar very high when he said, in Hindi I'll say, ab ke baar 400 par, which means that this time we will cross 400. He has not been able to get anywhere near that. And despite, like I said, having won, he has managed to give people that, that feeling of uncertainty, whether everything is, going well within the country, whether he is actually in charge, whether there is any kind of, doubt that the people of India have in his administration. So as he kind of focuses more on domestic issues, he will have less and less time, like he did before, to focus on overseas relations.
External relations. And what about specifically relations with the UAE?
Well, as far as relations with the UAE are concerned, I don't think there will be any visible changes. The UAE has always had, good relations with India. You will see that trade last fiscal was about $85 billion, if I'm not mistaken, and that is expected to go up to $100 billion in the next 5 years. And I don't think there will be any visible changes in that. UAE is a big investor in the Indian markets. The sovereign funds invest in India. And despite the stock markets having taken a beating yesterday, as you saw, about $400 billion were wiped out of the market in value. You've seen them already starting to come back. There was a rebound today, and it's likely to continue. And traditionally, if you see if the past is any indication, the stock markets have thrived after any election and have continued to grow. So I don't think there will be any visible changes as far as investments go from the UAE side on in the Indian markets.
Just got one more question, and you can choose who answers this, because I'm interested in, as you both are so knowledgeable about the topic and the history and the politics in the country, the odds of fourth term?
Ooh.
No.
No?
No, I don't think so. And not after the current. In fact, this time, I mean, we are taking a step forward in saying that he is going to come back as the Prime Minister, but there were noises and being made even before the election results were being announced, that there were rumblings within his own party as to whether he was really in charge anymore, him and Amit Shah. So we'll have to see how the dynamics plays out internally within the BJP, and the results which have the mandate that the Indian public has given the two parties, whether the opposition comes back as a force. So far in the last two elections, the opposition, there was no semblance of any opposition. Now there is. So we'll have to kind of see, what the next term says.
Well, I'll tell you what, in 5 years, I'll get you guys back here and we can
I look
talk
forward
about
to
it
that.
again.
Inshallah.
All right, thank you guys.
Thanks.
Well, that's it for this week's episode of A Closer Look, brought to you from right here in the Nationals newsroom in Abu Dhabi. Don't forget, if you'd like to see any of our previous episodes, you will find them all on our YouTube channel.